Hey, welcome to my channel. So a friend recently built me a nice computer for doing my video editing, and he recommended that I get it up off the ground. So clearly I had two choices. I could either put a couple of scrap 2x4s under it, or I could spend an afternoon building something nice for it. I decided alder was an inexpensive option that would blend in nicely with the carpet. So when I got my board ready, I cut it as short, longer, and marked them as 1, 2, 3, 4 so that I'd be able to get a continuous grain pattern around 3 of the 4 corners. I have a special talent for cutting something the wrong way or screwing a project up in some way that can always surprise me. So I've gotten really pretty good about trying to actually really mark out my work before I do anything. So here you can see that I've got not only the 1, 2, 3, 4 boards, but which pieces are going to go together. And then after I set up my blade, I decided I really better mark out which direction the miters are going to, because again, I could see myself grabbing the board and just cutting the miter the wrong direction. So taking a few extra minutes to make sure that I mark stuff out has definitely saved me some valuable lumber. Notice that I even drew that miter the wrong direction the first time, so sometimes miters kind of make my brain hurt. I like to sneak up on the miter at first because if I can get it to just where the saw just hits the very tip of the board, then my grain match is going to be the most consistent. If I end up in 1/8 of an inch or so, then the grain match isn't going to be quite as good. Once I have a good cut, then I just move my stop block in to touch, and then when I flip the other side, flip it around and put the other side against the stop block, then I should get a very nice cut, and then I will use that same stop block to reference for the other short board for both sides, so that way my box will end up square. And then just repeat the same process for the 2 long boards. I'm just using a large piece of plywood at the router table behind my workpiece so that I can put the grooves in for the shelf, and I forgot to hit play when I actually did this, so you'll notice the bit is not spinning. So this is just a dramatic reenactment of how I did this. So at this point, I still have the shelf slightly oversized, and I did this on purpose so that I can trim it down at the end, because you can always cut more off, but you just can't add it back in. Do you ever have those days where you feel like you're all thumbs? Well, this was one of those days for me. I struggled from even pulling the tape apart to even getting this box to actually go together. I felt very uncoordinated and nothing seemed to go right. At this point, my plan was to actually put 4 drawers in this, so I was not expecting to leave the top open as a shelf. So if I had known that I was going to do that, I would have spent more time sanding and actually pre-finishing the inside, which I didn't think would be exposed. Thankfully, I did at least put tape down so I wouldn't have nearly as much glue squeeze out to deal with. So I thought using a board at the underside of this would be helpful, and I don't know if that's what was throwing me off or what, but for some reason this was really awkward and I had a hard time putting this together. These cheap little acid brushes are really helpful to help get the glue on nice and thin, and I really do like the glue bot too, so that you can actually squeeze the glue up from the bottom and not have to, keep pounding on your glue bottle to get the glue to the top. So normally folding a box up is one of my very favorite steps because it usually just goes really smooth and it's fun to watch it take shape. Well, again, you can just see I'm having one of those days. So it actually took me 2 attempts to get this to work right, but when it did, then it was all good. So it finally folded up the way that it is supposed to, and it probably only took me like a dozen boxes to get smart enough to actually have a few pieces of tape already torn so that when I got to the final corner, I had those pieces ready. I'm not always the quickest learner. On a smaller box, you can just leave the tape coming off of one of the sides, so when you fold it up, you just have to continue to roll that edge over. But on a bigger box, it does get a little bit more awkward. So once I've made sure that the box is nice and square, I'm going to go ahead and get the shelf cut down to final size and then get that in here too. That will even add a little bit more stability. With this shelf, I cut this a few times because I am really just creeping up on the final dimensions so that I'm able to get a really nice fit. Then I applied a little bit of glue with the brush again so that I wouldn't have a lot of squeeze out. And then I didn't feel, on a small little cabinet like this, I didn't feel the need for any clamps more than the tape, and it all held together beautifully. The difference is pretty much always in the details. So of course you want to take the time to sand your project nicely. And anytime I get to any little imperfections, the easiest way that I've found to fill these is just put a little dot of glue, grab some of the shavings from the same wood that you've been using and just rub it in, let it dry a little, sand it again, and your little imperfections will pretty much disappear. The drawers are very small and are going to only hold lightweight items, so I wanted to keep these as simple as possible. So the drawers are both basically two boxes that just slide all the way in and slide all the way out, and all of the edges are flush. So there's not like a larger drawer front or anything like that. So when I made the two fronts, I did it just out of one piece of alder, so there'd be continuous grain between the two drawers, and I just routed out the edges a 1/4 of an inch in so that the 1/4 inch Baltic birch would sit flush, and then I took it to about half of the depth of the wood. So I originally cut the back piece, I was going to make it out of MDF, but then I realized I only had enough to do one of them that way. So I made 2 Baltic birch backs, and then because I was having one of those days when I went to assemble the first box, I still grabbed that piece of MDF and assembled it in place. Sometimes when I'm in assembly mode, I'm so busy thinking about how it's going to fit together that I didn't even look at the materials that I was using. So the two drawers don't match perfectly, but at least it's in a place where no one's going to see it. So luckily that will hopefully be fresh in my brain, so if I'm doing something that actually matters next time, I will know to take the piece of material that I don't want to use and remove it from the assembly area before I start. I'm just attaching this using 3/4 inch brad nails and some wood glue. And again, I was trying to keep this as simple as possible. So there's no grooves or anything like that. The bottom is just going to be nailed on, and then the sides are also going to be just nailed on. Since I have very little room for error with these nails, I'm trying to be very careful to keep my nailer perpendicular to the edge that I am nailing. That will really reduce the chances that a nail comes out the side, because the nails are the way they kind of wedge will bend side to side. So if you're shooting at it perpendicular, that nail's going to stay in. If it deflects at all, it's hidden within the piece. If you turn it the other way, that's when it might blow out the side. Then I just made sure everything looked okay and dry fitted, and then I just hit everything with several coats of spray lacquer. This stuff dries almost instantly, so for a kind of project that I'm just trying to knock out in a couple of hours, it is the perfect finish. I have a wide variety of different handles and knobs and whatnot that I've collected over the years when I'm at, reclaimed building supply stores and can pick them up for pennies on the dollar. So I selected 2 that I thought would look pretty decent, marked out a spot, drilled the holes, and got those installed. This was a little bit different type of drawer than I've ever built before, so part of why I like doing little projects like this that no one will pretty much see but me is that it gives me the opportunity to try things, and that's how we learn and grow. So if you're enjoying my work, please like and subscribe and follow along, and hopefully we can all learn some things together.